This happened 3 years ago. I know a lot of people drag things out, but I don't see the need to do that. So I'm just going to say exactly what happened as it happened. I was hiking through a remote section of forest in northern Minnesota, way off any marked trails. I've always preferred it that way. The actual wilderness, not the sanitized version you get on popular trails with their wooden markers and worn paths. Just me and the woods, the way they're supposed to be. I'd been out there for maybe 4 hours when I noticed I'd lost my bearings. It happens sometimes when you're not following a trail, but usually I can orient myself pretty quickly. This time was different. Nothing looked familiar. The sun was still high enough that I wasn't in immediate danger, but that sick feeling of being lost was already settling into my stomach. I tried to stay calm and kept walking, telling myself I'd spot something recognizable soon. But instead, I started picking up on this rustling sound behind me. The last thing you'd want to hear if you're in my position. The rustling wasn't constant. Just every 30 seconds or so, like something was matching my pace. I'd stop and it would stop too. I'd start walking and there it was again. I kept telling myself it was probably a deer, but I'd hiked enough times to know that deer don't follow people like that. I kept going, but at that point, I was pretty sure I was being stalked by something. And then all at once, the rustling turned into movement all around me. It was a worst-case scenario. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. I was surrounded on all sides by a pack of wolves. 6 or 7 of them, if I had to guess. Some of them were snarling at me, and some of them were just staring. But it was clear to me that to them I was a meal. I wasn't going to go down without a fight, though. I had my knife out, even though I knew the odds were stacked against me. I remember thinking, this is it. This is actually how I'm going to die. Alone in the woods because I was too stubborn to stick to the marked trails. I was trying to decide if I should make myself big or stay still or what, when every single wolf suddenly went rigid all at once too. Not like they were reacting to each other, but rather all reacting to something else. Their ears shot up, and they all looked in the same direction, somewhere over my shoulder. And then they just scattered. Scattered as in full-on sprint in the opposite direction from where they'd been looking, almost like they were the ones being hunted. That's when the fear started setting in for real. Until that point, it had just been a wicked adrenaline rush, which makes sense given the life and death scenario I thought I was in. But once I was alone again, I started getting the creeps. The first thing I noticed after the wolves scampered away was that the woods were completely silent. No wind, no birds, no critters, nothing. It was like someone had flipped a switch in there. It was still light out, but things felt a little dimmer. Sort of how your vision fades when you re-lightheaded or right before you're about to pass out. But the worst part by far was why the wolves had run off in the first place. I mean, they had been scared of something. That much was obvious, but whatever could have scared off an entire pack of wolves from a long distance away, I couldn't imagine. I needed to keep moving, but I felt really unsettled, even in the daylight. I kind of wanted to follow the wolves, but I was pretty certain I had been walking in the right direction to begin with. So I was at a crossroads. Follow the wolves just to potentially get encircled again and get even more lost, or continue in the right direction and possibly encounter whatever it was that had scared them off. An impossible choice. I ultimately decided to keep walking in the direction I thought would take me out of the woods, which meant walking toward whatever it was that the wolves had been freaked out by. My logic was I could waste an hour walking the way the wolves had come from, only to turn around anyway and have to walk back in the dark, or just bite my tongue and walk that way while I still had daylight. So that's what I did. Maybe 20 minutes later, I saw what looked like a clearing up ahead. For a second, I thought it might have been a campsite. I could see what looked like a fire ring, but as I got closer, I realized it was wrong. All wrong. There were symbols carved into the trees surrounding the clearing, not initials or trail markers. These were intentional, deep cuts forming patterns I didn't recognize. It gets worse, though. Things were hanging from the branches on what looked like leather cords. Some looked like bones, small ones, maybe from birds or rodents. Others were metal, rusted, and twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. The fire pit in the center wasn't just a ring of stones. The stones were delicately stacked on top of one another, like structures. There was weird stuff in the fire pit, too. Pieces of cloth, what looked like jewelry, and other objects I couldn't really identify. But here's what made me really freak out. The smoke. There was this thick black smoke that was just hanging in the air, about 6 feet from the ground. It wasn't moving or dissipating, and it didn't look like it was coming from the fire pit either. It was just there. I really wish I could say it was just leftover smoke from the fire pit. The fire pit didn't even look like it had been used recently. I stood at the edge of that clearing. I was frozen to the spot. For some reason, I just couldn't look away from that smoke. My eyes kept tracking back to it, even when I tried focusing on something else.